Okay, so my hair is really messy. I'm in my car. I just ate a bunch of Taco Bell and I'm ready to talk about movies. So, right now I'm going to talk about the top, or I guess some, I don't know how many there are specifically, under movies that I feel are underrated and why. Because, yeah, that's all I want to talk about right now. So, my number one film that is unrelated, so, my number one film that I believe is underrated is Marnie. It's by Alfred Hitchcock. It is, I think it's the second film that Tippi Hedren starred in with Hitchcock. He actually ruined Tippi Hedren's career pretty much after it for a lot of reasons. I think Marnie by Hitchcock is really underrated just because I think it's peak Hitchcock's psychological thriller things. I think Vertigo is very good. And it deals with it very, very well. However, I think Marnie deals with it to a separate degree. I do think that it's really interesting to watch Marnie in relation to what Hitchcock put her through at the time. Essentially, Hitchcock just put her through a ton of verbal and physical, or I guess mental abuse, pretty much. He refused to let a lot of the people on set discuss directly with her, and it's because she actually turned him down. Like, he made sexual advances on her and she said no, and so he made her life a living hell on set, pretty much. So I mean, thinking about that in terms of what Marnie's going through and what commentary he's making on Marnie's placement in society and her treatment as a female character in a world that is unkind to females is really interesting, especially when in relation to him putting her through that. So it's a weird, like, Nietzschean cycle, and there's a weird, like, meta element to Marnie that really, like, I don't want to say enhances, but it gives you a separate way to look at Marnie. I also think Tippi Hedren is just a fantastic actress. She does an amazing job in Marnie. If you've seen her, you've most likely seen her in The Birds, because that's a lot more, I guess, revered or talked about in terms of Hitchcock. But I think Marnie was something that just kind of, a lot of people said it wasn't very good in comparison to all of Hitchcock's other films. It kind of, like, slipped under the radar in terms of that. So, I think it's great. I think it's fantastic. I think Tippi Hedren does a great job. Tippi Hedren and Sean Connery have really good chemistry. It also makes really interesting meta commentary. So the James Bond franchise, it primarily focused on, it didn't really, a lot of it came from North by Northwest and a lot of Hitchcock's thriller films. So the formula for a James Bond film is pretty much watered down Hitchcock without a lot of the psychological elements. So it's also really interesting that Hitchcock decided to cast and use Sean Connery in his film because it just adds a different meta element with the James Bond franchise and that relationship with Hitchcock. So yeah, that's why I think Marnie is very underrated, and I think everybody should watch it. The next film is Phantom of the Paradise. It is a rock opera by Brian De Palma, and it came out around the same time as Rocky Horror Picture Show, but Rocky Horror Picture Show just kind of, like, rode the cult status, I guess, wave, and Phantom of the Paradise managed to slip under the radar again, kind of like Marnie. So Phantom of the Paradise is a rock opera about a man who essentially sells his soul to the devil for music. I don't know. It's a hodgepodge of a lot of different things and tropes. It's a hodgepodge of a lot of literary things like Dorian Gray, Phantom of the Opera, all that type of thing. That's really interesting. And then it's also a kind of a perversion of the success story, and it has a lot of commentary on Hollywood and the music industry and that type of thing. I think some of the reasons that make Phantom of the Paradise so amazing is, I mean, it was revered. Like, nobody liked it when it came out for some reason, even though it's perfect. And so it still got an Oscar nomination for Best Original Score by Paul Williams because it's that great. The score in Phantom of the Paradise is one of the best scores I've ever heard in a film, because it has a way of enhancing the narrative elements without giving things away, if that makes sense. At the beginning, there's a song that essentially lays out the whole narrative in terms of relationships and thematic elements, but it doesn't give anything away to you. And it's not, like, super literal, like a stage musical or something like that, which I love stage musicals, but they're a little literal sometimes. But yeah, so I mean, I would say honestly, even just the music soundtrack on its own is worth the watch, and is, like, should be a lot more revered than it is, and should be talked about a lot more than it does. The second is, I really like the acting in it. I think it's really well done. William Finley plays the lead, the Phantom of the Paradise, if you will. and Paul Williams plays the villain. Paul Williams does a fantastic job. He's one of the best villains of all time, and you know, his performance is very non-traditional for a villain, because I mean, you look at Paul Williams, he doesn't really seem like a villain, but he does a really, really good job of tapping into like just a really like shitty person, like a terrible person. He really hits that rig. He's so gross as a villain, you know? He's just the worst. But I mean, he does a great job in portraying a terrible person. And then yeah, it's Jessica Harper. She was in Suspiria. The trailer for the new one just released, so you may be vaguely aware of Suspiria. Jessica Harper starred in the original Suspiria, and this was actually her first film debut, and she does a fantastic job. So yeah, that's why I think Phantom of the Paradise is also underrated. The third and final film I want to talk about as underrated, I'll probably do a part 2 of this because there's tons of films that I think are underrated, but the next one is Thor. Now, it may seem interesting to you that I put that as underrated and it's like a big blockbuster, but I think Thor is really interesting. I love Thor a lot. It's one of my favorite Marvel movies for sure, and it just really frustrates me that everybody puts it in like the bottom of their list, and they're like, oh, Thor was so boring, it was so stupid. It's so, it's just so aggravating to me, because I just think, okay, I really like Kenneth Branagh as a director. I find myself crossing over with film and theater a lot. I really like theater and I really like film, but I think Kenneth Branagh does it perfect. Like, he's so great. Like, he adds such a great theatrical element to film without it being too much. I'm an Ibsen fan over Shakespeare. I think Shakespeare's like okay, you know, he's pretty cool. But the thing I like a lot about Thor is that it really encapsulates kind of that Shakespearean like tragedy very, very well. I really like the whole Machiavellian Hamlet thing going on between Thor and Loki. I think it's very well acted. In terms of the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole, I mean, a lot of the world building gets like, people like kind of like equate it to just Captain America and Iron Man, which obviously they had a huge part, but Thor was one of the first films to come out and really set the stage for Marvel and really set the stage for success and like line it up, you know? And so I think it's just really underrated and it doesn't get enough credit for what it deserves. And that's the one. So yeah, that was my video. It was pretty quick. I'm sorry if the camera's super shaky through the whole time because I'm a monster. But let me know, what films do you find underrated? Which films do you think people either just get wrong critically or don't talk about enough? Let me know down in the comments below. I would love to connect with you. I have an Instagram. It's _RenaissanceWoman. The link will be in the description below. You can visit my website, erinmitchell.com, and my blog that is on erinmitchell.com, or you can just check me out on Facebook. But yeah, okay, if you want to hear me talk about movies more in depth, my boyfriend and I actually have a podcast called Gentlemen for Cinephiles. It's in my channels, and I'll also put it in the description box down below. So yeah, goodbye, have a great night.